Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. We have Orlando Sanchez with us. This guy is just a world-class mixed martial artist. He does seminars. He teaches some incredible moves, not only on the mat, but off the mat, mind power as well. And Jay actually introduced him to me a few weeks ago from Decoders of Truth. So now here we are. And I got to tell you, Orlando, it is an honor to speak with you. How the heck are you?
I'm doing wonderful. It's my honor's all mine, man. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, we were talking a little bit off the air about kind of your upbringing and such. I know that if you go to SureDog.com and other sites out there, it does show your record as far as mixed martial arts, what belts you have, who you've trained with, and also you kind of went from rags to riches in a sense. I mean, you really went through a really rough life path to get to where you are now, and a lot of people might have just given up, and they would be 6 feet under right now, but you're literally you did the opposite. So I find that fascinating, and I was wondering if you could kind of share that story with us as well. But before we do that, tell our audience a bit about yourself, and why you got into martial arts, how long you've been doing it.
Sure. My name is Orlando Sanchez. I'm currently 33 years old. I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I own 2 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools, Gracie Barra La Cañada Flintridge and Gracie Barra Pasadena, both full-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools. I started really late in life, actually, in the martial arts world. I started when I was 26 years old, which is really late for, a competitive athlete in this realm. But I started at 26 years old and was able to become the best American in the world in a matter of a few years. Got my black belt in 4 years, which only a couple people have ever done. Won the ADCC last year, which only 4 Americans have ever done since it started 30 years ago. Had done all these things, and the reason I started martial arts was because I was a hardcore drug addict, and basically I was going to die or I had to figure something out. And once I figured out that I wanted to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it just saved my life. I just switched one addiction to another.
Well, definitely. I mean, it sounds like you've got an addictive personality, so you just took that into something beneficial, and that's incredible. So 4 years to get your black belt. Now, obviously, anybody can get a belt and say, "Oh, I've got a brown belt. Well, I've got a black belt," based on their teacher. But to get a true black belt like you did in 4 years, I mean, that's almost unheard of. How long does it take typically to get a real legit black belt?
Typically in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a real black belt will take you probably 10, 12 years. From a person who's training consistently and all that stuff.
So you think that just your desire to get into something else was what kind of fueled that, plus you're just naturally built to be a fighter? I mean, you're a heavyweight, right? So
Yeah, I'm a heavyweight. Yeah, it was a point. I mean, the actual story of how I got into it was when I was 26 years old. I had been using especially cocaine for like 7 years at that point. And I mean, I got to a point where it was so heavy. I was doing like an ounce of cocaine a day, selling cocaine to fuel my habit. And I was 365 pounds. So 365 pounds, doing an ounce of cocaine a day, was taking all kinds of steroids in my early 20s that damaged me pretty bad, drinking heavily, to go to sleep at night because I was so wired from cocaine. So at 26 years old, I was, like I said, 360 pounds. And I remember laying in my bed one night and I felt like there was an elephant on my chest. And I'll never forget, man, I was looking on the side of my room and there was like a big mirror. And I was smoking a cocaine-laced cigarette. And I don't even smoke cigarettes. And I'm laying there and I said, well, I'm either going to, I'm probably going to die tonight. I was fine with it. I was like, okay, well, here it is. I'm at the end of the road. I'm dead. And at that point, I said, if I make it to tomorrow, then I will choose to try to change my life. So next morning I got up and I was always in gyms and I was a manager at a Gold's Gym and did these things. So I went and spoke to a buddy of mine. I was like, hey, can you help me, man? I want to maybe do some box and kickbox, something to get me my competitive fuels back. And so I started some kickboxing and went to this little school, Muay Thai school in Pasadena, called Sityo Tong. And I went with a friend of mine and slowly started getting into that. And I remember I was so fat, they didn't even have shorts that fit me. So I had like cut sweatpants and I was like, just sweating out cocaine from 7 years of hard use. And it was just a disaster. And about 4 months into that, little guy came into the gym one day and he did jiu-jitsu. And he asked me, he goes, oh, you want to do some jiu-jitsu? I said, sure, man. And what is that? And he's like, oh, we'll just wrestle and grapple. And soon enough, I mean, he was like a quarter my size and he just beat the living fuck out of me. He just beat me up so bad and, choked me, popped my elbows. And at that moment in time, I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. I want to learn this. This is what I want to do. And that day, 26 years old, I was like, I'm going to do this. And I dedicated my life to it after that. And like I said, I broke almost every record there is to break in jiu-jitsu. I got my black belt 4 years later. At 30 years old, I was a black belt and won the world championships numerous times, won the Pan Ams 3 times, like just went on a tear. And it was like a flash, man. It was like a dream. It just all happened. And here I am, 33, 34 years old now. I own 2 schools. I have 2 kids. I'm married, not doing cocaine anymore. And have won every world championship there is to win. So it's pretty crazy. It's been a wild ride, man. Wild ride.
That's incredible. And you've also met some heavy hitters, in no pun intended, in the industry as well. I saw a picture of you and Arlovsky the other day. You're grappling with him, and you've met other people as well that I'm sure that probably even had multiple titles in the UFC and Pride. But now, did you ever fight in Pride or UFC?
No, I started fighting mixed martial arts kind of continuously as I grappled. So I started fighting professionally when I was like a purple belt. I have 6 professional fights. I'm undefeated. And, the goal has been the last couple of years to fight in the UFC. But just so much stuff has been going on. And just kind of as I mature and as the MMA industry just kind of changes so much, I've just kind of decided I've been taking this kind of last year just to kind of relax and get my head straight and before I jump back in. So we'll see if next year make a run back to go to the UFC and fight in the UFC. I'm 6-0 professionally. So, 6-0 heavyweight world champion jiu-jitsu fighter. All I need is probably one more fight and I'll be in the UFC. So we'll see if I do that this year.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what is your take on the current state of mixed martial arts and the amount of influence the UFC has?
It's a great sport, man. It's such a great sport, but it's just gotten so hard because the UFC is such a monster. It's so big and powerful. So, if you're not connected or if you're not kind of politically in there or, the money is so hard. I mean, to be where I'm at my age now, to have family, kids, and make good money outside, it's hard to want to go fight, professionally in a huge organization and get paid $5,000. It's just, it doesn't make sense anymore. And that's why the problem is there's so many young kids and young guys who, they would pay to fight, so when you have guys who would pay to fight in the UFC for free, it's hard to gain a value for yourself in these mixed martial art, organizations. So it's nice to see guys like Bellator doing really well, paying fighters better, making more of a show. I just think it has a long way to go, before it becomes something where people can really make a living off, because making a living off of fighting mixed martial arts right now is virtually impossible.
And
that's actually one of the questions I was going to ask, Orlando, and I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Now, I see these mixed martial artists putting their heart and soul in the ring. The brutality that they deal with and the punches and kicks and twists and turns that they take in the ring, let alone outside of the ring, is just mind-boggling. And personally, I don't think they get paid nearly enough, especially when you look at some of the other sports and what professional football players, basketball players, baseball players make. It's incredible. And I've also seen a lot of fights that take place that are questionable, in my opinion. For example, if you saw the Conor McGregor fight versus Chad Mendes, it looked like Chad had that fight up until the end of the round when Conor said he was going to win that fight. Conor punches him, he goes down, and when he gets back up, after the ref calls the fight off at the end of the round, like Conor called, it seems like Chad didn't even fight it. So I'm not saying it was rigged, but it certainly left questions in my mind. What's your take on that?
I was there. Yeah, I was right there on the side. No, it's not rigged at all. That's fighting. Until you're out there and you're breathing heavy and you lose your breath and you get punched in the face, like it's a whole different monster, especially when you're tired. And Chad got tired that fight and he couldn't deal with it the second round and he got put to sleep. That's fighting, that's fighting. Like you were saying, is I think the state of MMA right now it's taken guys 20 years to finally get a title shot. Right. I got guys who, I'm a good friend with Fabricio Verdum, and I love the guy, and he's an amazing fighter. And I was there with him, and I was his partner all the way till he got the belt, and he became the heavyweight champion of the world. And I was with in his camp for 5 years. We trained together. But imagine here's a guy who started training at 20 years old and didn't get to the top of the world, until the top of the UFC until he was almost 40. That's right. 20 years of your life, and together it just doesn't add up, So it's really hard for the state of MMA, I think, to really try to make it, So that's why I always encourage these young guys who want to fight and follow martial arts. I really encourage them to learn a real, like a skill set, like a martial art, like a jiu-jitsu or a Muay Thai or something, that can help them develop a school or start a business so they don't have to worry about just fighting for money, because just fighting for money, man, unless you're the top 5%, it's going to be a rough road. There's taking on jobs at Starbucks to fight professionally. It's hard. It's really hard.
I'm sure it's not only physically difficult, but mentally, spiritually as well, financially. How long does it take for a training camp typically in a professional fight?
8 weeks, 2 months. Imagine 2 months, you do a couple fights a year. That's half a year you're spent training, and all that stuff. I mean, it's hard. It's a hard sport, that's for sure. I love it, but it's hard. It's a tough place.
Orlando, I've seen a lot of championship fights in the UFC. John Jones fighting Gustafsson. I saw Gustafsson winning that fight. I saw St. Pierre fighting Hendricks. I mean, Hendricks definitely had the better end on that fight, at least what they looked like at the end of the fight. I've seen Lyoto Machida retain his belt when he fought Shogun. And those 3 fights in particular, I definitely saw going the other way. And a lot of people say if you're a champion, well, you have to take the belt not in a decision, but by knockout. And that seems to be the case. What do you think?
You have to really win the belt. I think that's the way, the unspoken truth behind that situation. If you have a champion with a belt, you got to either knock him out or dominate him. But if it comes close, the champion's always gonna win. I think that's.
Did you see that fight with Gus?
Yeah, it was tough. It was close, but like I said, it wasn't enough to beat the champ.
That definitely makes more sense. I'm glad you bring that to our attention. Now, I'm looking at your website right now, gbpasadena.com. You've got hundreds of students. What's their main focus when they go to your schools? Are they wanting just tactics for self-defense, or do they want to learn mixed martial arts for competition typically?
I'm a strictly jiu-jitsu school. So we only do traditional gi Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So we have, like I said, 2 schools and, over 500 students, and it's we run a big shop.
Okay.
Deal.
And so you got to be extremely flexible with jiu-jitsu, right? I mean, that's something that
yes, somewhat. Flexibility helps, but you don't have to be. There's positions for everybody, I guess you could say.
Okay.
You don't have to be super, but it helps. It definitely helps.
Like for you, do you do a particular amount of time each day for just stretching? Is that a good idea?
When I'm warm, after a training, I'll do some stretching. We always do a good warm up and stretch before classes and stuff, but I should be stretching a lot more than I do.
Who do you see right now as an upcomer that at any time could just bust out like Conor McGregor or Ronda Rousey?
Oh man, there's so many. That's the thing about. I think that's the thing about the UFC is there's just so many good fighters now. There's just so many fighters. You can in all the divisions you look, it's like, there's so many guys you don't even know who these guys are anymore. And I think that's what's starting to get crazy about the UFC, and especially the UFC. I think since the uniform thing, and really, you ask anybody who fights UFC, it's only going to be, they're going to say Conor and Ronda, John Jones. There's only a few faces of the UFC anymore, and I think there's just so many good fighters that it's hard to even market these guys anymore in the UFC. I think that's what Bellator is doing so well. Some of these other companies are doing so well that they're actually trying to market a lot of them, other smaller fighters and making a production and making cool shows. And, it's hard because now, especially now, man, you're getting kids who are starting fighting at 5 years old. Right. So now by the time guys are 16, 17, they're ready to fight in the big time. There's so many good fighters. It can happen. What's cool about mixed martial arts is it can be overnight. It could be an overnight sensation. And like the kid Mickey Gall just fought, what's his name? I just went blank.
Yeah, that's Northcutt.
Literally, they were in the gym one day, and now they're on top of the world the next, like in a blink of an eye. So it's a very interesting sport. There's no other sport like that where you can become a superstar overnight that quick, And
sure.
But it's still very weird. I think MMA's got a long way to go, but there's people trying to form unions and organizations to help fighters and the Ali acts, and I think that's the right way to go to make it more of a professional company where guys can make a living from it.
Part of this fighters union, essentially.
Yeah, there's all kinds. There's a few organizations right now that are starting up to try to get something going. We'll see. We'll see if they do. I hope they do for the future of the sport.
Are there people that you call out, and do you watch a lot of fights?
Yeah. I mean, I'm involved in everything always.
When you watch these fights, do you put yourself in the picture sometimes and say, I could beat that guy?
Easily. I mean, I could beat anybody in the UFC right now. I could beat anybody in Bellator. I mean, I could beat anybody in the world if I wanted to right now.
Nice.
So the thing the thing about me right now is just the timing and the desire to actually want to get back in there and fight again. But as far as my ability, I can beat anybody in the world right now.
If you could pick one fight, who would it be with?
Man, I don't know. I'd fight anybody. I'd fight anybody. Fedor would be a fun fight. Fighting Fedor would be fun. I don't really know. I don't know Fedor. I've met him through the years, but don't know him. But I mean, just because his name is so big. My training partner, my good friend Fabricio, was the first guy to beat Fedor. So, but yeah, there's so many good. There's a lot of good fights out there.
A lot of times it's about matchups too, right? I remember the fight that I recently saw with Tyrone Woodley and Steve Wonderboy Thompson. I thought Thompson was going to win that fight for sure, just based on his strange positioning, unique fighting. He's got definitely his own match or his own skills for matchups, and Tyrone did just an incredible job, in my opinion, offsetting that. And it was a good fight.
I think he's great, man. I love Tyrone Woodley too. He's a personal friend, and he's amazing too. He's a great fighter. He's a great champ. The fight I want to see is McGregor versus Woodley. That's what I want to watch.
That would be an interesting fight because Woodley's got a lot of weight on him.
Yeah, no, he's not too much, man. I think it would be a great fight. I mean, I would love it for Woodley. I think it would help him too a lot, build his name and lace his pockets. He deserves it. He's a champ, And I heard today that he called out McGregor to fight in Ireland for the belt, for the 170 belt. So that's what I heard. I think the UFC should do it. I think Conor McGregor, nobody wants to watch him fight anybody in the lightweight right now. Those fights aren't really interesting to people. I think the fight right now to make is Tyrone and Conor. That would be awesome.
I'll tell you, that would be absolutely incredible if he won a third belt in Ireland in his hometown. Talk about manifesting your reality or visualizing your reality. Now, let me ask you, with his punches, do you think that there's something natural to that, or anybody could be trained to punch as hard as he does? Because he's an incredible boxer too.
He's just talented, man. He's just talented, and he works hard, and he's just gifted. He has good rhythm. He's got good hand-eye coordination. He's got good athleticism. He's just genetically really talented. I can speak the same for myself, like just having blessed genetics. Sometimes you don't, sometimes you're born with stuff that you don't have to work so hard at. And I think he's a perfect example. He's just on point. I don't think anybody who is going to try to box with him at his weight, at his size, I don't think anybody can beat him right now. It'd have to be, like an Nate Diaz. Like these guys, I think are the ones to beat Conor. But anyone in his size, anyone in his range, I don't think beats him right now.
What do you think of the Diaz brothers?
Oh, I love them, man. They're great. They're owed a lot of respect.
Absolutely. Now, Orlando, do you consider yourself a spiritual person?
I believe in energy of the world, I guess you could say.
Okay.
I believe do the right thing, put the right energy out there, and I believe that the right energy will come back to you.
Nice.
What are the names of your schools?
Gracie Baja, La Cañada Flintridge, and Gracie Baja Pasadena.
Okay, great. And they're both located in California?
Yep. La Cañada Flintridge is one, and Pasadena is the other. You can go online and look up the website, Gracie Baja La Cañada or Gracie Baja Pasadena.
You teach people also like really good self-defense?
That's what we do. That's all we do.
Okay.
I don't deal with fighters. I don't deal with fighters at all. I deal with the 99% of the world,
Okay.
I deal with, we teach from 2 years old all the way up to 75 years old is one of my students. And we teach normal fundamentals class. We have a curriculum. I mean, my whole mission and goal and with all my Gracie Baja teammates and stuff is really to teach jiu-jitsu to the masses, to teach it to as many people as we can. People who do not want to fight, who do not want to compete. I mean, that's my target, is to help people change their lives through jiu-jitsu, That's the goal, yeah. So, I mean, our classes are filled with lawyers and doctors and teachers and dentists and just normal people.
I've also noticed a lot of people in the mixed martial arts community seem to be a lot more aware of what's going on, a lot more awake and astute to their surroundings. I remember watching Ted Kennedy talk about political stuff on the Alex Jones show. He seems to be in the know. Charles Sonnen definitely seems to be aware of a lot of stuff. They seem political and outspoken at the same time. Would you consider yourself to be more awake than the average Joe and aware of a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes and the false media pretext a lot of times, what they show on a lot of these mainstream media outlets?
Oh, 100%, man. I believe the more in tune that you get with your own self, and the more integrated you become in your own brain and your own mind and your own life, the more you realize how much bullshit is in front of our face every day. Since my drug addiction passed with cocaine and all the abuse, what really saved me was after I started Jitsu a few years into that, I got into, just my personal therapy. So I have a therapist that I've been with for 5 years now, and I do men's groups and I do all kinds of practice with my own self. But the therapy, and really sitting with the therapy and dissecting my brain constantly on a weekly basis that's what's really changed my life. That's what's made me win all these championships and be the best dad and all these things is really understanding how the brain works and understanding how chemical imbalance is different, how I need dopamine to feel normal, and I have to do things to I have to live differently than others in order to just be quote unquote normal. So I think once I started integrating myself and figuring out how my brain really works, then you really start seeing a lot more bullshit, a lot more blatantly, on TV and when people talk, and just feel people's energy. I can tell them when they're bullshitting you right away,
Nice.
So I just think about becoming integrated just in your own self that changes you.
Now, I'm certainly a big fan of California. I enjoy the national parks out there, some of the best parks in the world. Definitely beautiful coastline, incredible cities, neat people, good food. There's a lot going for it. And at the same time, politically, I'm about as opposite of what some of the political archetypes represented in California as it gets. For example, forced vaccinations. They're very strict on gun control, which doesn't do any good anyway. I mean, you look at cities like Chicago that have some of the strictest gun control laws in the nation, and more people get murdered out there every day with guns than just about anywhere else as far as big cities that I can think of off the top of my head, if you look up it statistically. What do you think about the vaccines and the way they want to force everybody to get them if they want to go to public school and if you have a particular job in the medical industry?
It isn't even really, I don't see much of it. I mean, as far as my day-to-day, I try to focus on my own little circle and try to, stay in tune with my life and my family and my business and my schools and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, it definitely is California is everywhere you go here. I mean, everything is accepted as far as that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I do see the anti-gun stuff and the vaccine stuff. I see a lot of that, and I see it, but I just kind of pay no mind to it as far as that. We did in my family, my wife and I, we have 2 kids. We've done both of our births completely natural.
That's awesome.
No drugs, no drugs at all. It was the most. When I going through that experience, I don't know how somebody. Honestly, I don't know how somebody could have a baby in a hospital with drugs and C-sections and cut. Dude, it's after experiencing a natural birth with my wife. I don't know how you could not do that. I don't know. So research of cutting the umbilical cord and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's mind blowing. So, but yeah, in that world, that was probably one of the greatest experiences of my life is childbirth and doing something like that all natural. And it really makes other things so non-existent, when you see such amazing stuff like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I give you serious respect for that. Most people, even if they had a golden opportunity to go that route, probably wouldn't, just because it would take more time and energy. And I think that's awesome for yourself and your child.
My wife did it we did it in the bathtub, and it was cool, man. No drugs. It was wild, man. And we have 2 extremely healthy kids. They never get sick. I mean, they're so strong. They eat so much. They're so big. I mean, you can tell the difference. I truly believe that you can tell the difference in a child of how they eat, how they act, and how they are. And I think it has a lot to do with the birth and the way the kids are raised in that first 6-8 months, all those, I mean, pumping your kid full of vaccines in the first year of their life is just, I don't know. We didn't do it. We didn't do it. We have vaccinated our kids with some of the vaccines, but we waited till they were, I mean, my daughter doesn't have any, but we waited for my son until he's almost 6 now. So he didn't get anything until he was 4.5. You know, we waited a long time to even start thinking about that stuff. But I mean, to be a brand new baby and to be pumped full of chemicals like that, I don't think that would, on any level, is that okay? So,
Right on.
Orlando, I've got to say, what you do in mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu is incredible. And the fact that you can combine that with the life path that you had previously and the stories that go with that, I think that that is absolutely remarkable. Another thing that I give you credit for is talking about it, because a lot of people that might go through that type of life path and those struggles might not want to share it with other people, especially being in the public limelight like you are. So certainly appreciate that. And if you would, for our audience, let them know about where your schools are if maybe they're interested in jiu-jitsu or techniques to help protect themselves. Thank you.
That's my main reason behind talking so much. It's just hopefully I can help somebody. You know, my name is Orlando Sanchez, like I said. I'm on Instagram at OrlandoGB72, Facebook Orlando Sanchez. You can go to my websites, Gracie Baja Pasadena, and then Gracie Baja La Cañada Flintridge. So check out my websites. Follow me. I'm very active on Instagram. If anybody wants to send me a message, all the info is there. So thanks for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leap Project. We have Orlando Sanchez with us. This guy is just a world-class mixed martial artist. He does seminars. He teaches some incredible moves, not only on the mat, but off the mat, you know, mind power as well. And Jay actually introduced him to me a few weeks ago from Decoders of Truth. So now here we are. And I got to tell you, Orlando, it is an honor to speak with you. How the heck are you?
I'm doing wonderful. It's my honor's all mine, man. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, we were talking a little bit off the air about kind of your upbringing and such. I know that if you go to SureDog.com and other sites out there, it does show your record as far as mixed martial arts, what belts you have, who you've trained with, and also you kind of went from rags to riches in a sense. I mean, you really went through a really rough life path to get to where you are now, and a lot of people might have just given up, and you know they would be 6 feet under right now, but you're literally you did the opposite. So I find that fascinating, and I was wondering if you could kind of share that story with us as well. But before we do that, tell our audience a bit about yourself, you know, and why you got into martial arts, how long you've been doing it.
Sure. My name is Orlando Sanchez. I'm currently 33 years old. I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I own 2 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools, Gracie Baja La Cañada Flintridge and Gracie Baja Pasadena, both full-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools. I started really late in life, actually, in the martial arts world. I started when I was 26 years old, which is really late for, you know, a competitive athlete in this realm. But I started at 26 years old and was able to become the best American in the world in a matter of a few years. Got my black belt in 4 years, which only a couple people have ever done. Won the ADCC last year, which only 4 Americans have ever done since it started 30 years ago. Had done all these things, and the reason I started martial arts was because I was a hardcore drug addict, and basically I was going to die or I had to figure something out. And once I figured out that I wanted to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it just saved my life. I just switched one addiction to another.
Well, definitely. I mean, it sounds like you've got an addictive personality, so you just took that into something beneficial, and that's incredible. So 4 years to get your black belt. Now, obviously, anybody can get a belt and say, "Oh, I've got a brown belt. Well, I've got a black belt," based on their teacher. But to get a true black belt like you did in 4 years, I mean, that's almost unheard of. How long does it take typically to get a real legit black belt?
Typically in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a real black belt will take you probably 10, 12 years. You know, from a person who's training consistently and all that stuff.
So you think that just your desire to get into something else was what kind of fueled that? Plus, you're just naturally built to be a fighter. I mean, you're a heavyweight, right? So. Yeah,
I'm a heavyweight. And yeah, it was a point. I mean, the actual story of how I got into it was when I was 26 years old. I had been using especially cocaine for like 7 years at that point. And I mean, I got to a point where it was so heavy. I was doing like an ounce of cocaine a day, you know, selling cocaine to fuel my habit. And I was 365 pounds. So 365 pounds, doing an ounce of cocaine a day, was taking all kinds of steroids in my early 20s that damaged me pretty bad. Drinking heavily, you know, to go to sleep at night because I was so wired from cocaine. So at 26 years old, I was, like I said, 360 pounds. And I remember laying in my bed one night and I felt like there was an elephant on my chest. And I'll never forget, man, I was looking on the side of my room and there was like a big mirror. And I was smoking a cocaine-laced cigarette. And I was like, I don't even smoke cigarettes. And then laying there and I said, well, I'm either going to, I'm probably going to die tonight.